You should have host now.
Well, good morning, afternoon, or evening to everyone. Depends on where are you located. Thank you for joining us for this webinar. I know we had short notice, but to be honest, our webinar is quite full, so we can start and begin. For today, we have Coaching at Scale, RTE and Scrum Master, all in the art of success. If Dwayne, you can switch to the next slide, that would be great. Just a few words about Agile Sparks in general. We are founded since 2008. We work with more than 400 organizations worldwide. We're teaching classes of SAFe and of Scrum.org publicly and privately for a long while. And we work with companies, Fortune 500 companies, quite a few of them. Without further ado, I want to present you with Dwayne Stroman. He's an SPCT. He has more than 20 years working as software engineer, architect, product developer. And it's a lot of privilege to have Dwayne with us. I do want to give him the full time slot that I promised. So Dwayne, take it from here.
Okay, thanks, Ruslan. And just before we get started, if I can ask everyone to stay on mute. We will have time for questions later, so there will be a chance to use the audio. But just to be polite to others, make sure that you're on mute. Background noise can be very deceiving sometimes. You think it's quiet, but it's not. All right, so I want to talk about a topic that to me is very exciting because it's a really core component of how we move forward from a Lean Agile mindset, from a Lean Agile approach, specifically with implementing Scaled Agile framework, and even more specifically within the Agile release train, the building block of how we implement Lean and Agile using SAFe. A little bit about me, my experience. So I'm a SAFe program consultant trainer. I've been doing this for a long time. I have 20 plus years as a software engineer, architect, product developer, had a lot of different roles in different areas. The last 18, 19 years, I've really been focusing on the Lean Agile side of things, coaching, teaching, learning, experimenting sometimes, working with a lot of different company types, mostly in the US, some in Europe. A lot of Fortune 50 companies, some major transformation efforts that I've worked with. So a little bit of been there, done that. And that's what I want to share today is some of that experience of how important it is to coach at scale. So this graphic really shows it well. At scale, the complexity ratchets up. We know that. Within a Scrum team working together, we have enough complexity as it is. Once we start to align those teams working together into a team of teams, the complexity does not go away. It increases. And so internal coaching is absolutely vital to make that successful. And that's what I want to talk about today is those internal coaches, specifically the release train engineers and the Scrum Masters. But really this applies if you're any type of internal coach. Maybe you're a coach working within an organization as a contractor. Perhaps you're working with an organization as just that coaching role without the title. That's what this is really focused on. Some of the tools and tips and techniques and things that you can do to make your organization more successful. So the first thing is let's focus on the release train engineer, the RTE. It's absolutely a coaching role. Now, first and foremost, when I teach classes, when I work and coach RTEs and train them, the first thing I let them know is there's three key things that they do: process improvement, facilitation, and coaching. And coaching is the one that tends to get left to the side. We tend to not allocate time for it. It tends to be the one that's ignored. But I use this quote from Scaled Agile to help you realize how important it is that even from Scaled Agile, they're saying this person is a servant leader and coach for the Agile release train. That RT is the onboard coach for that train. And one of their key goals is to coach to drive relentless improvement, process improvement, mindset improvement, all of those things. Now note in here that these red highlights are my own, but just to help you understand that this is coming directly from Scaled Agile, that it's the same approach. Coaching is absolutely vital. Let's talk about Scrum Masters for a second, not to leave them behind. They are the internal coach to the team. And yet one of the key differences in Scaled Agile is the Scrum Master has a much larger scope, a much larger touch point, if you will, because they're working with other Scrum Masters, with other product owners, with product management, business owners. They're really working in a much bigger 360 approach. And so helping the Scrum Masters understand that they are also coaches, specifically for their Agile teams, but also outside of that circle as well. So there's key components to the Scrum Master role from coaching. And again, often left to the side because we just don't spend enough time thinking about the importance of it. So I want to talk a little bit about Scaled Agile. One of the new things with version 5.0 that just came out in January is the added attention, and in fact, 2 new core competencies within Scaled Agile. We now have 7 core competencies, and all 7 of those are critical to success. And as an RTE, as a Scrum Master, as an internal coach, it's absolutely vital that you are coaching to all of these elements. It's mission critical to have that onboard coach there. If you watch any sports or participate in any sports, you realize that coach is part of the team. They are not someone that comes in once in a while to give some information and so forth. They are absolutely part of the team. Ruslan, we're getting a little bit of feedback. Could we see if we could just mute everyone?
All right, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So again, if you're not familiar with these core competencies, I do want to really strongly encourage you to go learn, go check them out. We're going to talk later about some courses that we teach that will really give you a deep dive into these core competencies. But you also can go to the scaledagileFramework.com and read up on these competencies if you're not familiar with them. And honestly, the best way to teach a subject, or best way to learn a subject is to teach it. Because now you start to learn the different angles of it, the different understandings of it. Things like organizational agility. Well, what would a Scrum Master have to do with organizational agility? A lot. And so that's one of the key things that you can do to help educate yourself. So I have an approach that I use to help internal coaches, those onboard coaches, think about those core competencies. And I've broken those down into 4 different areas: teams, program, leadership, and enterprise. And that's the order that we're going to talk about these today. Specifically, team coaching really does focus on the team and technical agility core competency. It doesn't end there, but that is the crux of it. That is the basic building block of where you coach at the team levels using team and technical agility. Again, not ignoring the other ones, but that is the core of it. Program coaching, again, the really deep dive is Agile product delivery. Would you use others? Absolutely. Lean Agile leadership, solution delivery, continuous learning, absolutely makes sense at the program, but your focus is probably in Agile product delivery. Leadership coaching, fairly straightforward, Lean Agile leadership, but Lean Agile leadership is anything but straightforward. It is one of the most critical, if not the most critical aspect to having success with Scaled Agile and with a Lean Agile mindset. And understanding how to coach that, learning how to coach it, getting engaged with leadership at all levels of the organization is absolutely vital. And then we'll talk briefly about the enterprise-driven ones. And from a coaching standpoint, enterprise solution delivery, when we're talking about large, complex solutions, multiple systems working together. Continuous learning culture, one of the new core competencies that is absolutely vital to success. Organizational agility as well. And then lean portfolio management, while not new as a core competency, has definitely been getting a lot of attention and almost a facelift from all the experience that we've been gaining over the last couple of years. So here's one thing that I find really people struggle with is allocating time to coaching, allocating capacity to actually coaching, a part of your day. In fact, when I coach with RTs or Scrum Masters, one of the first things I hear from them is, well, I don't have time to coach. I'm facilitating, I'm doing this, I'm creating these reports, I'm doing whatever. And so the first thing we do is, let's go look at your calendar and see what's on your calendar. And then we start to see what can we eliminate? How can we put time in and actually create a capacity? And that's what I recommend to start with. Set aside 25% of your capacity and commit that, dedicate that to coaching. That could be learning a subject you can coach. It could be specifically coaching with one of the core competencies, one of the groups I've been talking about, and some of the specific areas. We're going to talk later more about empathy. Empathy and sympathy, two very different things. Sympathy is, wow, I really feel sorry for you. Empathy is, yeah, let's figure this out. Let's go solve this problem together. Servant leadership, hopefully you've heard that term before, critical component. And the thing I want to point out, we'll talk more about this during the webinar, is that servant leadership is not meek and mild. It's brave and bold. It's courageous. Ability to find the WIFM, what's in it for me? Everyone has those buttons, those things that they're looking for, those internal, intrinsic motivation things that they're looking for. Being able to find those as a coach is absolutely vital, because that's how you get the energy to move forward. And as I talked about, reserving time for the teams. If you're a release train engineer, set aside time to go visit with each team individually, where you're not rushed, you're not having to run to another meeting. You can just spend time with them, not a specific agenda, just go hang out, talk, learn, observe, do a Gemba walk. And exemplifying lifelong learning. We're going to talk more about this, but unless as an internal coach, you're exemplifying this style, it's going to feel false. The transparency will be there and they will see it. You have to exemplify that you are continuously trying to learn yourself. And then meet them close to where they're at. One of the things that I hear a lot from organizations I work with is, you don't understand our organization. You have to meet them where they are. There's a problem with that, because if we meet them where they are, they haven't made any effort to move forward. They have to at least extend a hand or start to take that first step. So I always coach to meet them close to where they're at. Reach out the hand, get them to start moving forward. And then last but not least, we hear a lot of times Scrum Masters remove impediments. No, they don't. Rarely can a Scrum Master, RTE, or especially a coach remove impediments. What they do is they facilitate the removal. They get the conversations going. They get the actions moving forward, but they're rarely the ones that actually move them forward. So really focus on facilitating that. So let's talk about team coaching first. Now, this is the Scaled Agile big picture. I'm sure all of you have seen this before. One of the key points I like to point out is, if you look at the entire big picture, so you see right now I have the whole big picture highlighted, all of that is there for one reason: to make those groups successful, the Agile teams. That's where value is delivered. That's where it's created. That's where value actually comes from. And so all of those other components are really there for the team. So we need to have that focus on the teams. If they are the ones actually delivering the value, why not start there? Why not focus with them first? Coaching, improving, process improvement, all of those things. Now, coaching scale is different than coaching a single Agile team. Even if you're coaching multiple teams at once, coaching teams that are scaling a team of teams, an Agile release train, is different. So some of the tips that I put out there, you need to be the coach, not the expert. There are many things that I have started to coach when I was not the expert, and we do it through exploration, through learning, through understanding, knowing what I have from background from other coaching aspects, but then applying that to that new subject, that new topic. The Tuckman model is a critical one. You see the graphic here: forming, storming, norming, performing. In several of our Scaled Agile classes, we talk about how to work through, in fact, specifically in the RTE class, we talk about how to help a team move through forming, storming, norming, and performing, as well as a team of teams, an Agile release train. And then focusing on key things like flow and PDCA, or plan, do, check, adjust cycles. Looking for those hidden things, those hidden improvements. Technical agility. Don't forget about the technical side. You may not have a technical background. That doesn't mean you have to become a technical expert to be able to coach. You can understand some of these basic principles, such as, if the teams are focused on the tools, they're focused on the wrong thing. Tools are simply there to help support us, not tell us what to do. You've probably heard the phrase from Scaled Agile: you can't scale crappy code. You really can't scale anything that's poorly built, product value, things like that. So helping the teams understand that they are now in a scaled environment. They cannot scale poor quality. Learn enough of the concepts of the technical side. Get the idiot's guide to whatever the technology is. Do the Google searches, whatever it takes. Learn as much as you can. And very often, a lot of these technologies, even if you come from a complete business side, have never played with technology before, it's fairly simple to find simple online tutorials where you can actually walk through and learn how to do Jenkins or GitHub or simple things like that. You don't need to be the expert. Just learning how the tool works, how it operates, where it can really help you coach to that. Learning and coaching DevOps, especially from a scaled agile DevOps approach, which focuses on mindset. That's the most important thing to focus on. So you don't have to be a DevOps tooling expert. It does help to learn the mindset behind it. Learning the T-shaped skills. So everyone has that core skill that they have, but helping them branch out and learn new skills. And again, coming from being a software engineer for so many years, I know how important it is and motivating it is to learn new skills every day. Supporting time to build in quality, the technical practices, all of those things, absolutely critical. I strongly recommend this guidance article from Scaled Agile, the Team and Technical Agility article. Very good article. Now, coaching measurements. I've got one example here. There are a number of them. But at the team level, I'm a huge fan of the Team and Technical Agility self-assessment. It's been around for a while. It keeps getting improved, but it's very tried and true. And it can very quickly, from a team perspective, it is a self-assessment, help them look for areas where they can improve. Now, one of the key things about this is the first time that a team takes this assessment, does it themselves, you're going to see fairly high numbers. You're going to see a lot of 4s and 5s. As they start to learn about what true product ownership involvement is or true technical agility is, those scores will actually go down even though they've been improving. That's okay. All this assessment does is give us target points where we have improvement opportunities. If we go from 4s to 2s, but it's still the highest rated area, it's still not an area to focus on. If we have some other areas that are at 1, those are the areas to focus on. So don't worry about the actual numbers, look for the spikes, the process improvement opportunities. And I strongly recommend the Scaled Agile Measure and Grow Workshop Toolkit. In fact, Andy Sales, a friend of mine, is doing a webinar next week on the Measure and Grow Workshop Toolkit. A great way to get involved and start to learn how can we implement the measure and grow concept within our Agile release trains. So let's talk about program coaching. And I'll pause real quick. Ruslan, do we have any questions yet? I think we're okay so far.
No, we're okay so far. I just remind everyone, if you have a question, please write it down in your chat box. And if we will be able to address it right away, we will. If not, we'll address it in the end of the webinar.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk about program coaching. So team coaching is coaching where the value is delivered. Program coaching is coaching where the strategy and the execution of value delivery really lives at that program level. Now, obviously, portfolio, enterprise has a lot to do with strategy, but this is where the strategy turns to execution. And so a critical area to be coaching. Now, this is a graphic I came up with a few years ago, and I think it helps people understand how critical it is for the release train engineer, the Scrum Master, and that onboard coach, even if you're not one of these 2 roles. But if you're in that position as that onboard coach, to focus on the process. Notice in the phrase here, I've got, you should focus on how value flows, not what value is delivered. A train engineer in a real train doesn't really care what cargo is on the train. They care that that train is working mechanically, that it's getting to the station on time, that it's delivering well, all of those things. That's what the train engineer cares about. And that's what that onboard coach should focus on. When the train engineer, the Scrum Master, the onboard coach gets focused on the actual value, what should be delivered, we lose sight of improvement. We lose sight of the principles, the process, the practices, that actual improvement approach. Now, you can absolutely influence and improve the actual value conversations through this, but you're doing it as a coach. You're doing it asking powerful questions. And again, just because if you're at the Scrum Master role, you absolutely have that same concept, that same accountability, if you will, It just may not be at the same scope as the release train engineer, but you coach where you have the opportunities. And if you focus on these, the principles, the process, the practices, that's where real continuous relentless improvement comes from. So are you coaching the program? This is a question you need to ask yourself. If I'm this onboard coach, if I am this release train engineer, this Scrum Master, am I focusing on these areas, and how much time am I spending? Measurement, how am I improving? Am I seeing results? Things like techniques such as WSJF, weighted shortest job first, customer centricity and design thinking. Those are typically new concepts to people working in the product management team, product owners, product managers. They tend to be subject matter experts, SMEs, and they don't understand as well the customer centricity and design thinking. Great opportunity to coach towards improvement. The collaboration upstream and downstream, being able to step back from the conversations that are happening, from the engagement that's happening, and see that value stream of conversation. Is there collaboration going upstream and downstream? Is it a two-way street? Is it a very open conversation? If not, those are opportunities for improvements. Now, this is a phrase I use a lot. Features and stories, they're opportunities, not buckets of work. This is a really, almost an easy one to find. Maybe not as easy to solve, but is a critical one. Getting product management, again, both product owners and product managers focused on not writing detailed design requirements. Instead, writing down, here's the opportunity, here's the problem we want to solve. Well, by the way, here's the guardrails. When you solve this, please stay within these guardrails. It now brings so many of the SAFe principles, such as principle number 3, number 8, and 9 about intrinsic motivation, decentralized decision-making, assuming variability, into the hands of the teams. As Captain Marquet says, bring the decision to where the information is. And by changing features and stories to opportunities, you help do that. Coaching system architect, system engineer, those roles are critical aspects to have that vision and approach for how we're moving forward from a technical aspect. Coaching them on architectural runway, what that looks like, how to implement intentional architecture and emergent design, how to help the architects and engineers work with the teams to evolve the architecture rather than dictate it from the beginning. And then obviously the system team. Now, common pattern is, not always, but the system team tends not to have a Scrum Master. They still need coaching. That onboard coach is absolutely critical to help coach, especially from a Kanban perspective. If they're using that, understanding that Kanban is not as simple as people think it is. It is simple, and in its simplicity is where the complexity comes from. And obviously supporting the teams, helping the system team understand that their role, their key goal is in supporting the teams. So on this slide, I have a number of different tips for you. And by the way, these slides will be available online later on. So this is a fairly busy slide, but I want to call out just a couple of key ones here. Lower left corner, promoting a team of teams culture, making it about we, not me. From a scaling perspective, this is absolutely critical. Moving from a collection of teams to a team of teams, that's one of the key areas that you can coach to. Using the SAFe principles. When teams are looking around saying, you know, this practice that Scaled Agile tells us we need to do, we don't understand why, and we don't think it works very well for us. How can we improve that? The principles come in. Safe events to coach all facets of the art, using those opportunities, finding those. And the last thing I want to call it is in the upper left corner here, essential safe. Now this used to be called the 10 critical, or the 10 components, but it's really that Agile release train concept, program and teams working together, finding out, learning what does essential safe really look like. And there's 10 critical success factors. You can look up that guidance article. If you're not doing those 10 things, you have just found opportunities for improvement. Don't be discouraged. Look at that as an opportunity to get better. Now, coaching art, agility, and PI planning, one of the most important, if not the most important. In fact, the quote from Dean and the team and the framework team is, there's no magic to Scaled Agile except maybe PI planning. And I, from seeing it over 100 times, I absolutely agree. In PI planning, so here's some high-level guidance that I have, and I have some more details here. The release train engineer, focusing on that high level, using normalized story points, coaching those roles during PI planning, working with business owners to help them understand. Make sure you're sharing yourself across the teams. If you see a problem, go get the team started on solving it and then back away and let them continue with it. Let them learn on their own and come back to them and see how they're doing. If you spend more than 5 or 10 minutes with one team, the other teams are suffering. There's no question. Be that butterfly going from team to team. Be visible the entire day. If you're an RTE, you absolutely know that you probably don't get a whole lot of bio breaks and you have to sneak them in when you can. You need to be visible. You need to be moving around, high energy the entire day. Use energizers to help other people get involved. If you see PI planning starting to lag in energy, starting to slow down, maybe take a quick 2-minute break and say, we're going to do jumping jacks or walk around the tables or something interesting just to get the energy back. The Scrum Masters. So you are core and critical to the success of PI planning, because PI planning success comes from the teams, not from program, not from leadership, but come from the teams. So different concepts like raise the water level evenly, bringing up that value between stories to talking about objectives, to risks we're identifying, to moving to the program board, coming back to stories. Keep moving that water level at each of those buckets evenly. As a Scrum Master, not be the center of attention. If you need to dive in and get things moving as quickly as you can, I love the phrase, go from being the guide, from being the sage on the stage to being the guide on the side. As quickly as you can, move to that where you can take a back seat. And once in a while, step back and just don't respond. Listen to the team, learn, hear how they're doing on their own. Let them make some mistakes. Let them go down a path a bit. And only when you see some issues, start to correct. You will learn a lot about how the team will learn and adapt by letting them go on their own for a little bit. Some of the other concept, preconceived is pre-committed. Be very careful that you do not go too deep into planning before PI planning. And again, in our release train engineer course, we talk a lot about how much is too much. Watching the time boxes. And then one I really like is testing the plan at regular intervals. So during PI planning, ask the team, if we were to do a draft plan review right now, what would that look like? Where would the gaps be? Where would the holes be? And practicing that, and now that you've done essentially an iteration, you've done a PDCA cycle, now you can dive in and say, okay, we found some gaps. This would not be a very good draft plan review. Let's improve those gaps. Let's go fill those holes in. Now, a little bit more deeper dive on some specific tips that I give, and I'm not going to deep dive on these, but these will be in the slides. Good objectives involve ugly writing. And high level, what it means is start writing objectives as early as you can. I love to see objectives that are crossed out, new words, rewritten, all of that. It shows that they started early and learned from it. Teams that think that they have to write perfect prose for an objective and that's the only thing they can write, they're going to struggle. They will have writer's block. They will not be focusing on the right things. Get something down, add to it, iterate on it, learn on it. That's what I mean by ugly writing. It's scratched out, changed, iterated. Those are the best objectives. Program board rules. I've got a few rules that I use. If you see one person at the program board, again, this does not apply just to the RTE, but Scrum Master, any of those onboard coaches. If you see one person making a change at the board, go find out why. Because very often what happens is that person could be making a commitment for another team. I want at least 2 people at the board making a change, because it shows that from one team to another, and by the way, those 2 people are from different teams. It shows that that collaboration is happening. Person from team A and person team B going together to the board saying, okay, this is what we agreed on, right? We should be able to complete this feature in iteration 3 if you're able to do this dependency we have in iteration 2. That's what we agreed, right? Yes. Okay, let's put those up on the wall and put the string up together. Good. So as an onboard coach, if you see one person at the board, go find out what's going on. Start early. Don't wait to start putting things on the program board. Get them up early. They're taped up. They can be moved. String can be moved. Now, obviously, we're in COVID world right now with remote. Same things apply. As an onboard coach, watch that program board. If you see one person in whatever tool you're using and they're making changes, stop them, pause and ask, hey, can I just ask what's going on? Looks like you might be making a commitment for another team. Is that what's happening? So learn as quickly as you can. Iteration plans. This is probably very difficult for a lot to think of, but iteration plans during PI planning are what if scenarios. You do not commit to iteration plans in PI planning. You commit to objectives. We use the iteration planning to discover the objectives, to discover the risks. So treat them as what if scenarios. This is one of many possible ways to meet these objectives. We know there are other ways. In fact, more than once, I have had teams create multiple plan versions, what if scenarios, high level, lightweight versions, so that they can say, hey, there's a different way to solve this objective, and it informs the objectives better. So keep that in mind. Iteration plans are what if scenarios. One of the harder things to coach because we're used to creating plans, iteration plans that we commit to. Breadth versus depth. Again, start off with a very high level plan. I like to see teams, and some of the really high functioning teams in PI planning, they have a draft plan review ready in an hour, but it's full of holes. There's gaps, there's things missing, and they go back and fill those in. But they have an end-to-end plan they could show if they needed to, and then they iterate on that. And that's what we're talking about, is as quickly as possible, get something down, learn from it, and then start to fill in the gaps in between. No silent writing. Now, this might be a little bit different in the days of COVID and remote and all of that, but from an in-person standpoint, everybody has sticky notes in their hand, and as they're writing ideas down, they're calling them out. Hey, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this, and then put it up on the wall. Every time one person says, hey, we could do this, it spurs 3 to 4 different thoughts in other people. That's true collaboration. That's what we want, is that constant communication going. Beware of that in a remote world, because it can be very easy for people to do one or the other. Just talk or just write down virtual stickies on the board. Get them to do both. Work on doing both at the same time. Now, this is a little bit more in-depth slide. Again, this is more intended for after the fact to be able to dive in deeper. But some of the key things I want to point out are things like system demos. They are not optional. The phrase I use is the only company, we want to actually demonstrate the system, because the only company that can use PowerPoint to demonstrate progress is the Microsoft Office team. Everyone else should be using their actual system to demonstrate. At the program level, search and destroy on cues. If you have not read Don Reidert's book, Principles of Product Development Flow, incredible book. One of his principles is talking about cues, and he says larger cues amplify variability. And in fact, he talks about that cues are really the root cause of the majority of our economic waste. So search and destroy on those cues. Try to eliminate, try to reduce, whatever it is you can do. Daily stand-ups. Think about the reason for the 3 questions. Make it more like a bit of a team huddle, if you will. If you're really answering the 3 questions every day, what I did yesterday, what I'm going to do today, what my impediments are, then we haven't been collaborating the last 24 hours. We should already know that. So you should see the 3 questions dissipate and turn into much more of a, well, we all know what we did the last 24 hours. That didn't work so well. How do we change? What do we need to adjust? That's what the type of stand-up that you really want. All right, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about leadership coaching. Now, leadership coaching is critical because leadership are the ones that struggle the most. In my experience, team members at the team level, they take to this Lean Agile mindset much more quickly because, frankly, it's a lot of how they've been working for a while anyways. It's leadership that really struggles because it's very foreign, it's very different to the way they've been acting in the past. And their job is tough. So we need to have empathy. Previously in my career, I would look around and say, what is wrong with leadership? I don't know what book they read. I don't know where they got these ideas from. But as I started to learn the pressure they were under, the struggles, the system that they were working within, I started to gain true empathy. And I love this quote from Dr. Brown. She talks about empathy fueling connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Feeling sorry for someone separates you. Feeling empathy someone binds you together. Two very different things. Find that empathy for leadership. But it also requires courage. Now, this is both from a leadership standpoint as well as a coaching standpoint. Coaching leadership can take a fair amount of courage. These are people that you might report to, that maybe your boss reports to, and trying to create that coaching relationship with them is not easy, but it is absolutely vital to do that. Understanding that as frightened as you are, the leadership that you want to work with are probably just as much or more frightened. Think about where they're at, and this may help with the empathy. If they make a wrong decision, hundreds, thousands of people could lose their jobs. Customers could be without service. There's so many burdens on them right now that understanding how much courage they need to change how they do things is absolutely vital. And you standing up to the things that you're afraid of will help them see that as well. That's why I love this quote. Courage is really the ability to do something that frightens someone, that it frightens you, facing that fear. So some guidance on leadership coaching, a lot of information on here, but some key points to focus on. Thinking lean, eliminating waste, amplify learning. This really comes from the Lean Software Development Toolkit from the Poppendykes. And then embracing agility, helping them focus on these 4 common things about individuals and interactions, working solutions from the manifesto, helping them make the Agile Manifesto real, and then how they value those things over the other things below. And a couple more things, and one thing that leadership really struggles with, and you can help them with, is a fixed mindset. And so a fixed mindset, all of us have fixed mindset and growth mindset. We have areas where we believe what we believe and it's stuck, it's locked in. And other areas where we're much more flexible and open to learning about it. Recognizing that is the first step, helping leadership understand where they have a fixed mindset and also where they have a growth mindset, because where they have that growth mindset, how they got there in that area can be applied to areas where they have a fixed mindset. They can see the different results. When they have a growth mindset, you can find how outcomes are much better. The people working with them are much more engaged and so forth when they're using that growth mindset perspective, how important that is to apply. And I focused on 4 key areas here about prioritizing differently, using economic sequencing, getting that economic framework in place, that systems viewpoint, taking a holistic view, understanding the entire system. Most leadership tend to focus on their own silos and their own areas to the detriment of the handoffs in between. Assuming variability. Far too often we create those time and true, time-tested project plans that we know how those go. We end up changing and changing and changing. Let's just start with assuming variability, helping leadership understand that they should begin with the point that things will change. And then leading versus managing. There's a key difference between management skills are still needed. We need to manage the system. But leadership creates environments, creates systems, improves systems. And that's what we need them to really focus on. Not throw away the management skills, but really focus on the leadership skills instead. And enterprise coaching. I want to talk briefly about that. Now, this really encompasses 4 of the 7 core competencies. I don't want to say that they're not critical. They absolutely are. But from a continuous learning culture, this one is absolutely vital. It's helping an organization learn how to learn and how to continue that learning. In fact, a lot of experts and industry experts, and a lot of this information comes from Peter Senge's work, The 5th Discipline, where studies have shown that individual learning does not benefit the organization. Only what becomes group learning, organizational learning across the organization, that's when it actually benefits the organization. And the companies that are thriving right now in the COVID world are the ones that have already started down that continuous learning culture pathway. Now, as an RT, Scrum Master, onboard coach, it's absolutely critical that you both coach and exemplify this. That continuous learning approach for you is absolutely critical, that you showcase. Don't be afraid to show that you're continuously learning. It's not bragging, it's helping people understand that you are helping to improve. And there's a lot of things you can implement to help with that continuous learning. Things like communities of practice, brown bags, show and tell, the learning challenge. I love this. I'm going to challenge you to learn this topic, and we're going to come back together and talk about this later on. And then finally, measuring for continuous improvement. This quote is from a friend of mine. When we know little, we only need a little information to be better informed. When we know a lot, or we think we do, we need much more information to make a more informed decision. The moral of that story, of that quote, is that early on, you're going to find easy coaching opportunities. They'll be fairly simple, fairly clear. But as you start to improve that process, improve that system, you're going to have to improve the measurements, because the coaching changes will be more fine-tuned. You'll be into tweaking dials rather than turning them on and off. So keep that in mind. The more you go down this path, the more you're going to have to focus on improving how you measure. Not necessarily how much, but how well, how accurately. Okay, and then finally, I want to talk about moving forward, continue learning and really moving forward in this. How do you get this journey started? So the first thing is your own continuous learning. I just talked about that, but if you want to exemplify a continuous learning culture, it starts with you. How you're learning, what are you doing? And some of the key things, again, establishing these different approaches. And as you do so, be transparent. If you establish a community of practice, you do not need to be the expert. In fact, by showing that you're not the expert, that you're learning alongside the others, can build that trust, build that transparency. We're learning together. And learning patterns. Look at your own learning patterns. Identify them. How do you learn? Everyone learns differently. Sometimes, like for example, reading books. I know a lot of my fellow coaches and SPCTs really like to do books on audio. So they'll go to Amazon, Kindle, and they're listening to books all the time. That works great for them. I can't do that because my learning style is I will read a paragraph or two and it spurs ideas and I'm off thinking about different things. And it takes me a month to finish a book. That's my learning style. So understand what your learning style is and optimize that, improve on that, try to take advantage of that. Once you do that, it will help you determine how others learn. In your immediate coaching circle, those people that you're working with directly, learn how they learn. It probably is not how you learn. We all learn differently. So learn as quickly as you can how others are learning and help them augment that, help them improve that. One thing I strongly recommend is to understand what you're reading now. Again, a good friend of mine, he's always asking other people, what are you reading today? What are you reading now? And it's as much a challenge as it is curiosity. And I like to ask that question too. Hey, what's on your Kindle right now? What's on your book stand, your nightstand? These are some of the books I've read in the past that are absolutely powerful, that have changed my thinking, my mindset, helped me move from fixed to growth mindset in many areas. Hard to call out any of them as better than the others. The Fifth Discipline is probably the most recent. Absolutely blew my mind as far as how to approach systems thinking, how to understand the difference between dialogue and decision and discussion. Team of Teams from General McChrystal absolutely applies to how do we take a collection of teams and turn them into a team of teams, a true agile release train. And then finally, I want to talk very quickly about some of the the courses that we teach and some of the things that you can not only attend, but if you're an SPC, a Safe Program Consultant, and we'll talk briefly about how to get there, some of the courses you can actually teach to use in your coaching. So the Safe Scrum Master course is not the equivalent of the CSM, if you will, but it does teach enough Scrum and Kanban and so forth, but it focuses on teaching to be that servant leader within a team perspective, in a team of teams approach. And then Advanced Scrum Master, now that I've got the basics down, this course is definitely advanced. It will show you the deep dive on how to measure cycle time, how to really move teams forward, all of those key things, servant leadership. It absolutely is an advanced course. Release Train Engineer, this is the course we're actually teaching next week. This is one of my favorite courses. I was lucky enough to help add to the material to begin with when the RTE course first came out, helped to write some of the exam. I love the course because it really is based on the knowledge of the students being collected. It's less of a training from the trainer and more from a being trained from your fellow students. So you're going to learn a lot from other coaches, other RTEs, other people that are facing the same problems you are and maybe have discovered different ways either that works or maybe even more important, ways that haven't worked. Implementing SAFe. This is the bread and butter of what I teach as a SAFe program consultant trainer in SPCT. This is launching new change agents, new SAFe program consultants where you can teach a lot of the previous classes we talked about and some we're going to talk about. As an onboard coach, having that certification is valuable, but having the mindset is even more valuable. Having that deeper dive, immersive understanding, and that validation that you do understand the framework, you do understand the principles, is a key ally in your onboard coaching. Now, whether or not you've attended Leading Safe or not, this course is absolutely valid. It's helpful. And again, we teach you how to teach as much as understanding the mindset and the approach. And so some additional SAFe courses, again, that are out there: SAFe for Teams, critical course. If your teams are struggling with an agile release train and they have not gone through this course, it's never too late. Help them get back into this to align along the principles before they try to create their own process version. SAFe Product Owner, Product Management, good course, really helps that product management team move forward. Agile Software Engineering, this is a very technical class. It does help the developers, the engineers, those types learn how to work within a lean agile environment. And then the DevOps course, one of my favorites because it really does focus on the mindset aspect of DevOps, not the tooling part of it, but the mindset. How do you really get it started? Okay, so with that, I went through these fairly quickly. I want to see if we have any questions from anyone. I noticed that we have a comment about Esther Derby's 7 Rules for Positive Productive Change. I have not read that. However, I am a big Esther Derby fan. I've met her several times way back in my career in 2010. I met her and we were co-speaking or co-presenting at a seminar. And she made a statement that I thought was profound. She talked about a team or a group that she worked with. She worked with them for about 3 months, and then she went away for 3 months, and she came back at the end of those 3 months, and they were doing fantastic. And she said, "This is awesome. What do you think the secret was?" And they said, "Well, we couldn't have done it without you, but we couldn't have done it with you." And she felt that that was so profound, and it really hit me in the fact that coaching is not a continuous hands-on. Very often it's a stand back and understand and learn, and then going back in, those PDCA cycles. So definitely good recommendation. If there's not any other questions, and we definitely do have more time, Ruslan, I want to turn it over. I know you wanted to talk about some upcoming class opportunities that we have.
Yes, thank you, Dwayne. Meanwhile, while I'm talking, I will post our mural here. If you have a question, please add to this mural. Oops, sorry. Let me do that again. If you have a question, we'll be happy to answer it. So if you don't want to write in the chat, please use mural. You don't need to register. It's anonymous. Yes, and in terms of classes, we do have quite a few classes upcoming in the next couple of months, starting with an RTE that Dwayne mentioned next week. We have an SPC class, 2 of them in July. We have SAFe DevOps class on July 13, ASE class on August 10th, and ASM class on August 13th. On the other hand, we have our Scrum.org classes, PSM, PSK, which is a Scrum with Kanban that Dwayne touched a little bit about before, and the Professionals Scrum Product Owner Advanced class on August 24th as well. Let's see if we have some questions that added to the mural. If not, Dwayne, you wanted to touch more. I know that you have some slides that you wanted to touch a bit later.
Yeah, and I do want to talk about the fact again that we are going to be providing these slides as Ruslan, you're going to be sending out an email to let people know where they can download this. And these slides really are intended to be helpful from a after the fact approach. In other words, there's a lot of text on these slides. I didn't expect everyone to capture all of that all at once. But I do want to talk about a couple more things, some additional learning. And one of the things that I put in here is where some of the issues happen when team agility is lacking. And again, focusing on the team approach. Look for some of these signs. When you see that process without the mindset, they're just going through the motions, repeating, doing the shortcuts. I see so often where organizations will say, yeah, we're going to implement scaled agile, we're going to implement safe, but we're not doing this, and we won't do this, and we won't do that. I always make the joke that it's similar to pulling out the manual for a 747 and saying, yeah, I'm going to fly this plane, but I don't like where the wing is. And let's change the airline, and let's change this before even flying the plane, before even learning how to fly it. Very, very dangerous. The onboard coach, the RTE and Scrum Master, you're going to see systemic issues. You're going to see people not wanting to come to inspect and adapt workshop. Progress isn't celebrated. It's simply, yeah, okay, we got our features and stories done. If you don't see system demos as a celebration, if you don't see objectives being met as a celebration, there's something missing. That's an opportunity for improvement. And the easy one is leadership saying, this isn't really any different. It absolutely should be different. If it's not, that's a clear indicator that there's opportunities there. And again, whenever you measure these things and you find things that are lacking, find systemic issues, find problems in the system, do not be upset, concerned, celebrate it. Wow, we found this issue. Now we can fix it. Now we can solve it. So I wanted to make sure that people had a chance to understand that there's more to coaching than just saying everything's happy. We're looking for some of these systemic issues. And this one is really about where the technical agility is lacking. When we have problems about there's just no time for built-in quality, we're just not getting to writing all the test cases we need and so on, that will come back to haunt you. It will come back to get you in the end. The principles are not being followed. They're not being worked through. They're not being understood. You know when you're making progress when you hear teams resonating the principles in their conversations. Easy one, deployments tied to releases. That's a common problem that all of us face. And again, even if you don't have that technical background, you still can dive in, learn how the system works, do value stream mapping to understand from when a feature is released to teams and they're able to start working on it to the point that it's actually released to the customer. Map that out. What are the steps that happen? What are the wait states in between? Where are the handoffs happening that are really hurting us? And then not measuring the impact of quality. Once you've done that value stream mapping, now you can go back and add measurements, things that we teach like in Release Train Engineer course, things like percent complete and accurate. From one step to another, what percent of the effort, the value add was complete and what percent was accurate? Very often we find extremely low numbers, single digit numbers that a piece of value from end to end, less than 10% makes it all the way through as complete and accurate in each step. So some of the key things that you want to look at. With that, yes, Ruslan?
We have just a few minutes left, but we do have a couple of questions came in.
Okay.
So the first one, and it's not 100% related to this webinar, so if you can be as short as possible, that will be great. Is the RTE and the Scrum Master full-time job? What about the team leader that is also a Scrum Master?
Yeah, that's a common question we get. And again, that is a symptom of an organizational issue, of a systemic issue underneath, not understanding the value of coaching. So the easy answer is absolutely. The Release Train Engineer, the Scrum Master is absolutely a full-time job. And here's why. The reason that people tend to think it's not, they only look at the facilitation and they miss the second part of process improvement. So if no one is improving the process, you keep facilitating the same process, we never get better. If we're not getting better, we're getting worse. There is no steady state. And finally, absolutely, if you're not allowing time for coaching, how do the other team members get better? How do they improve their Lean Agile mindset? How do they move forward? So absolutely, The Scrum Master, the release train engineer is absolutely a full-time job. Now, the team leader that is also a Scrum Master, again, this is an anti-pattern that is seeped into your organization from past thinking, allowing that past organizational thinking to come in, that we can multitask, we can do multiple things. If you read through the Agile, the Scaled Agile guidance articles around team and technical agility and all the other articles, there's no mention of a team leader. There is no team leader. The Scrum Master is not the team leader. They're the servant leader for the team. The product owner is the visionary, the validation person, the are we going the right direction? The team leads themselves. They are managing themselves. They are helping to improve the process. And the RTE and Scrum Master is coaching to that aspect.
Thank you,
Okay.
Dwayne. And the last question, it's probably not a one-word answer, but let's try. What is the best measurement to check if an art performs well?
Value delivery. It is actually a simple answer. How to get there? The answer is simple, but it's not easy. It's value delivery. Are we delivering value to the customers, and do we have the smile factor? Do we have customers coming back and saying, I love what you're doing, internal or external? If we're building internal solutions and systems for our internal customers, it's easy to find out. What are they saying about us? What are they thinking? Are they seeing improvement? If you are going from traditional waterfall standalone Scrum approach and implementing Scaled Agile, you absolutely should expect to see improvement from the first PI planning, from the first program execution. Absolutely. Do not accept less, because when you do, you say, oh, that's just the way it works. It's not how it works. If you focus on improving the system, focus on relentless improvement, you absolutely will see improvement in value delivery. And that's the thing to measure. How to measure that? One of the books I talked about before, How to Measure Anything. It's a great book that really helps you understand how to measure around different things. One of the other books I talked about from, let me get back to that real briefly, from Mark Schwantz, is talking about, let me get back to that, sorry. Oh, it's way back. Is really talking about how do you define value. Here we go. The art of business value. So this book in the center here, one of my favorite books, because Mark goes through and he doesn't tell you how to define value. He gives you reasons and understanding and thinking around the different ways we currently define value, and gives you possible approaches to go through. He does say how he defines value, but he asks you to create your own definition. Once you have that shared definition across your organization, now you can measure improvement in it. Are we improving that value?
Thank you, Dwayne. I think we're right on the money. It's 2:59. With that, I want to say that we're going to send the deck along with the recording of this webinar to everyone, and alongside with the list of our classes. If you have a question for either me and Dwayne, we'll hang out for here for a few more minutes. Please stay and ask. If not, we want to wish you a happy week and happy Monday.
And thank you for joining.
Yes, and thank you for joining.
Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you, Rushlin.
Okay, Ruslan, I think we can probably sign off. So next steps then, if for anyone that's still listening, is to as quickly
Give me just
as
1 sec. Dwayne, give me just 1 second.
Yep, sorry.
There you go. I removed
Okay.
everyone.
Yeah, so as quickly as
Good.
possible, get the information out there, because again, this webinar really was intended as a two-step. Go through the content and then have it, almost as a handbook. So I will work on the PDF and send that to you, and we can get that listed fairly quickly.